It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, here, the next question is from C. Welch. It says, question, 34-year-old male, 36-year-old female, gross income of $250,000, and we're on step 8. When do you know it's time to hire a tax accountant and stop self-filing? Each year seems to become more complex as we invest more. Brian, you were an accountant for. I guess you technically still count as an accountant. I know
accountant.
So you were a practicing accountant, actually filing tax returns for what, like almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, 16 plus years.
16 plus years. What guidance do you give to folks? Like, does everyone need to hire an accountant? Or how do you know when it makes sense to hire an accountant? Like, how do you kind of figure out, okay, yes, this is justified. No, it's not justified. This is the right way to do it. This is not the right way to do it. Any advice from a seasoned accountant on that thought process?
I'm going to talk as an accountant, but also as a person whose life has gotten more financially complicated.
Fair enough.
Did my own taxes for years, as you can imagine. If you had the software, you had the capability, why wouldn't you? But part of the deal when I sold the tax side of my business to a CPA firm was that they were going to do my taxes for free for 3 years. Mm-hmm. Because it was a great thing to say to our existing clients, hey, this CPA firm is also going to be doing my taxes. Here's the rest of the story. They're still doing my taxes because I thought I would have the biggest withdrawal from not doing my own taxes because I love doing my annual net worth statement. Mm-hmm. I love being actively involved in my personal financial decisions with my family. So I thought for sure I would be a little withdrawn if I didn't do my own personal income taxes. I don't miss it a bit because I still get to be the captain of the ship where I go and review the actual final product and I go and look at the tax return, make sure that I agree with everything. But instead of actually doing the work of inputting, I'm now managing and I've delegated out the preparation. But back to the question that C. Welch asked is that, look, there is going to be a step. I remember when I was 22, 23, doing my first tax season, I used to aspire to have the tax returns of the successful people with the K-1s, the big Schedule Ds with all the capital transactions going on. You don't have to look for that stuff because as you become more successful, complexity will just find you out. Yep. There's no hiding places from it whatsoever. And that is going to be the determining factor because you will have a situation where down the road and it sounds like because you described your income, you're now over $250,000. You need to figure out, am I itemizing my deductions? There's one clue. Do you have other income sources, whether it's K-1s from businesses you own or unique 1099s that are flowing through in addition to your W-2? That all those things are their unique tax credits, with all the conservation stuff, with all the, what you do to your house for energy credits, electric cars, education credits, all this stuff gets very complex. Yep. And I encourage anybody, because it only takes finding one thing that will justify the fee of what you're paying. Plus, I love the fact that most professional tax preparers, their software is going to run everything for you, track it for years to come. I know TurboTax will do that too when you have the online portal, but it's just nice when you have some ability to let somebody do the delegated grunt work of getting it in accurately, and then you just have the looking at the final product and making sure you're navigating the decision making well.
I don't want to belabor this point, but I think one of the issues I've heard you mention in the past, I'd love you to speak to a little bit. One of the benefits of having a professional preparer, especially if you are someone who is in real estate or who does have complication, is that the more complicated your tax return is, the higher your likelihood of the IRS probably asking a question, right? How does it play out for like a self-preparer versus someone who had their return professionally prepared if the IRS sends you a letter or asks you a question?
That's a great question, a great point too, and the fact that I have represented clients before the IRS, and it's a scary thing, guys. If you ever get now look, there's a difference between a letter you get in the mail. Those general inquiries is typically, and that's why this is general advice too, is that if you get a letter in the mail, don't just write a check. There's so many times the IRS is just looking for clarification. Right. Your tax return was perfectly fine the way it was originally filed, but they send out a notice And it breaks my heart when I find out people are just writing checks without really making sure they owe the money. But if you go deeper than just an inquiry letter that comes through that requires a response, and they actually want to do an in-person meeting, don't represent yourself. I mean, that is such a scary moment because when you get into a full audit situation where you're sitting down with the IRS, they can ask you anything. They can ask you about any year. You know, they can go back 3 years as long as there's no fraud. If there's fraud, they can go even further than that. And that's just, you never know what's going to be asked. You never know what the audit's going to mushroom out, especially if you have businesses, side gigs, and other things. So I always tell people, go hire somebody. It will be some of the best money you've ever spent to represent yourself, and you get into one of those complex type situations. And it's nice if you have a good preparer that actually has the capability. That's probably a question. If you have a complex financial situation, that probably should be a question you ask in your due diligence phase is, have you ever represented a client in front of the IRS, you know, beside, above and beyond just the letters of inquiry? And it might even be as you're interviewing CPAs, hey, if I get a letter in the mail from the IRS, is that going to be an additional charge for you to respond? Because now I don't know what standard practice is. I know when I was preparing tax returns, if I got the notice, I told all clients, send me your IRS notices. I want to see them. If there was just a point of clarification, meaning there was no error on my part of preparing the return, but I need to provide supporting documents to the IRS for clarification, I didn't charge clients for that. Now, if there was a mistake of omission by the client, because this is where usually things happen, is you're preparing the tax return, the client does something without telling the preparer. If you, the individual, didn't give the supporting documents to the preparer and you made the mistake, I would charge for those because I felt like, hey, as a preparer, that wasn't my fault. But that's why it's great if you have a relationship with a preparer that you basically share everything with them so there's no secrets. And that's why I think we come in handy. You know, our background as financial planners as well as having CPAs on staff is that we help pick up the pieces by reviewing clients' tax returns. I've had 2 conversations this week where clients have thanked us for finding mistakes on it because we say, hey, let us review your tax return before you file it. Not because we're trying to make the CPA look bad, but we just know how complex.
Second set of eyes.
Yeah, how complex taxes, they can embarrass anybody, and it bears fruit from time to time. And that's what, like, the client I'm thinking of from the meeting yesterday said, hey, by the way, because you caught that mistake, my CPA gave me free tax prep this year because he said he was horrified that he made that mistake. And I was like, look, you know that I think brilliant people can even make mistakes on tax preparation, but I'm glad you got not only the tax return fix, but you got a free tax prep fee because the CPA was so embarrassed. And I said, hey, that's a compliment that they believe so much in getting it right that they gave you some type of client benefit.